If you write in Scrivener, you likely know it has a bunch of fields you can use to detail your scenes, your chapters, your folders, and so on. Things like the document title, the synopsis, notes, keywords, labels, and more. What you may not know is that you can add new fields to customize Scrivener to your needs. Specifically, Scrivener has custom metadata that you can configure on a project-by-project basis. You might want to add a field to track the location of scenes, the setting, the specific time each scene takes place, or a date. You might have a need to track collaborators if you're working with other authors or perhaps editors who are giving you feedback on your work in Scrivener. Whatever your needs, Scrivener has you covered through its custom metadata features. While adding new metadata isn't all that complex, it may be difficult to know where to start and how to add the different types of fields Scrivener allows, and later how to access them. That's why I'm dedicating this video to custom metadata, how to add it, how to display it, and some ways that you can use it. So stick around. Hey, if you're new to the channel, I'm Brad Beaulieu, and I'm a full-time fantasy and science fiction author with a dozen novels, tons of short stories, and 20+ years of experience in the field of writing. I started a novel approach to share hard-earned lessons on writing, editing, publishing, and the business of writing, so hopefully you don't have to go through the same pain I did. If that sounds up your alley, be sure to subscribe, and if you find this video useful, I hope you'll like, share, and maybe even buy me a coffee on coffee.com. Link in the description below. Okay, so here we are in Scrivener. Now, I'm going to take you through 10 possibilities of new metadata that you could add, but I would be remiss if I didn't go over the existing metadata that you could use already. And some of these might have overlap, and some things you might have overlooked for ways that you could leverage them in your projects. So let me just touch on these really quickly. So I'll start here. I'm in a project that I've copied from my next book that's coming out. This is book 2 of the Book of the Holt trilogy, coming out in January. Big, fat, epic fantasy with dragons and lots of magic and epic tales. Plug over, I'll go to the first chapter on the left here on the binder. We can see the contents here. I'm in the editing view. And if I go to the inspector, the first tab in the inspector over on the left is the notes. So this has the synopsis. So I can go in here and type things. I can add notes as well. So those are 2 plus the title. This is the title right here. So those are 3 pieces of metadata you have at your beck and call. And then there's the metadata tab, this third tab. You can click on that. So it shows custom metadata right here, but right below we also have keywords. And so keywords is one of the major things that you can use. And to add new keywords, you can just click this plus here. Basically what you'll be doing, you can use keywords for more than one purpose, but it might get a little bit confusing. You can essentially add any number of keywords and then assign them to any given scene. So you could theoretically use them for something like, say, the time, the era a particular scene is taking place in, maybe past, future, present, or it could be a location. It could be Paris, Tokyo, New York, that type of thing. And you could have all those in the list. And you would just assign the ones that you need to any particular scene based on your needs. But that may get a little bit confusing, so you may want to use custom metadata for one or the other of those. But in the meantime, you could use keywords for whatever you like. So let's say I wanted to use keywords for the time frame of the story, and I might have a time travel story where I have distant past, near past, present, future, that sort of thing. So I've added some already. If I look at the show project keywords under this ellipsis right here, that shows the project keywords. I see that I have some added already. I can add new ones. I can remove them as long as they're not currently used. If they are used, it prevents you from doing that. But you can set these up however you want. And then once they're there, they're available for any project. So for ones that already exist, I can click here on that ellipsis again and say add keyword, and it shows me the ones that I've added already. So maybe this particular scene is in the past. And then I go to the next one, and maybe this one is in the future. And maybe it's more than one. I could add more than one keyword if I want. Maybe it jumps around a little bit. And then for different metadata, we're going to be using the outliner quite a bit. That's usually the place that you're going to use and see these. So if I go under the outliner view, And I'll just click the manuscript so I can see all of these. Actually, let me just do these few right here. And so we're in the outliner view. I did talk about how to get the most out of the corkboard and outliner views, and I'll link to that in the upper right so you can take a look at that video. And I'm going to get rid of the inspector just for the moment. And I've already added the keywords. As a reminder, if you want to add new columns to the outliner view, you can right click in this title bar up here, and it gives you a list of all the currently available metadata. And we'll see as we add new metadata, it adds those to the bottom of this list. So it's going to apply to existing out-of-the-box metadata as well as our new custom metadata. But here we can see I've added keywords and I'm showing them as color chips. You don't have to use that. You could show them as their actual values, but you may get more use out of this if you show them as chips. It depends on your needs. But here at a glance, as long as you know what those colors mean, past, present, future, that sort of thing, you can just see very quickly what each scene, each document is assigned in terms of those keywords. And you will know that keywords equals the time frame of the different scenes. Again, that could be setting instead. You could set up Tokyo, Paris, New York in those keywords instead, assign colors to them, and you'll know at a glance where each of the scenes takes place. So that's something that you can use right out of the box. And then labels as well is one more that I covered in some detail in how to use Scrivener, 10 steps to use Scrivener like a pro. I'll link to that as well. And in this case, I like to use that as the POV character because I write multi-POV books. And so I set up the label as the POV characters, the possible characters, and then I assign one and only one to each of the scenes. And then I use this color coding to know which POV character that scene is assigned to, who's going to be telling the story in that scene. But you don't have to use it for that. You could use it again for the setting, for the time frame, for any number of things. So keywords and labels are probably two of the main things that you should probably use first if you can, because, you know, setting up metadata, if you don't have to do it, why do it? This is meant for if you can't find it any other place or existing data for your use case, then go ahead and add new custom metadata. So I'm going to go back into the inspector here just so we have this available. And we see this set up custom metadata. And we want to create something to track the setting for each of the scenes. And this will bring up a dialog that has the project custom metadata. So this is per project. Every project has its own. You can inherit this if you copy from one project to the next when you start a new one. But if you start with a blank one or one of the template ones, then you're going to have nothing in here, just like this. So to add a new one, we just click this plus. And there's minus to delete the ones that you have, but let's click plus for now. And we're just going to say setting. Hit enter, and then we choose a type. So it can be text, checkbox, list, or date. So let's start with text. You can have an alignment for how it's shown in the outliner view. I'm typically going to have left, but you might have a reason for center or right. You can also wrap the text. This is short enough that I don't think we need that, but I'll go over an example later where we do. But for now, we're going to leave that blank. You can also use colored text. So you can make this red or blue or green or whatever. I'm just going to leave that off for now. And we'll say, okay. So now that custom metadata, the setting exists. And it exists for any of the scenes, any of the documents that I click. So currently we're focused, as we can see here, on Rhiannon sees Gonsalon. She goes to this fabled city. But let's just click on a new one. We'll go to Rylan Escapes. And we see it's there. And this will be true of anything that we click. That will be in this custom metadata tab over in the inspector. And for any of them, let's just go back to the top so we don't get lost. And we'll click setting and we'll say Gonsalon here. So that's just freeform text. It's not providing a list of any sort. We can just type whatever we like there. So that's one possibility. Now, if we want to go see it, we can click on the outliner view, and I'm going to just click on a few of these here again. And so we don't have the setting. Let me get rid of the inspector so I have more real estate. And I'm going to right click up here again. And we can see that setting now appears at the bottom. We just added that. So I'll click on that, and then it shows any of the documents that have a setting, it will show it. If not, it just shows a blank. And so here we see Gonsalon that we added. So that's one. So you can add this text field for whatever you need, whatever purpose you might have, to put in just a tiny bit of text and store it for future use, or possibly for looking and sorting in this outliner view, possibly even compiling it in your eventual, say, Word document or ebook. And I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. Okay, the second example is going to be the timeline. So again, let's pretend that I cannot use label, I cannot use keywords. Those are dedicated to something else in my project. So I'm going to create custom metadata for that. I'll go back to the inspector here, click on one of these. And so I see my setting over here. I can click on this ellipsis and it will come up with that same dialog that I brought up earlier. So I can see my setting. I'm going to add a new one. So I just click plus, and let's call this timeline. And so I'll hit enter, and I'm going to make this a list instead of text. So when I do that, note that it changes the pane at the bottom here. So if there's nothing, it gives you the option to change what's going to be in there. It'll have none as a default, but I can add something like past, present, and future. So now those are available. I'll say, okay, that has been created. And again, the timeline is available for any of the scenes, any of the documents, including folders or these sub-level documents. So if I click on a different one, I'll see that it's there. So timeline exists, and it's defaulted to none because that's what I set up for any given document in Scrivener that doesn't have this set. But if I click on this, it does have these available. So I can say past for this one. I can go back to this first chapter and say this one is in the present, and yet one more in the future. And so again, I'll go back to the outliner, grab some extra real estate, I'll right click, and we see timeline. So it just appears there. And let me get a range again. So I'm selecting these 3 folders, 3 scenes, and I can see that the timeline is none for the folder, but it's present for that first scene of Rhiannon's. It's past for Phaedron's, for Rodri's point of view, and then Rylan is future. And just like the setting, I can change any of these here. So I didn't show this earlier. Let me just click here. So I can double click in the setting, and I could change this to Glayend maybe. And as I covered in that other video on the Corkboard and outliner, once you're in this mode, once you're in edit mode, you can use up and down arrow to quickly change a whole bunch of stuff. And that works well for text fields. I'm not totally sure if it works on a list. I don't think so. So you can up and down arrow to pick the different values once you've clicked that to kind of awaken that pick list. Let's say I want to change this to present, or I have something that's none. I just click on that, change that to whatever I want. So the outliner view is a quick way to change this stuff too. You don't have to change it in the individual scenes or documents via the inspector. You can also do it directly here in the outliner view. Okay, so this list, as we see, is one and only one value. But let's say we had something like characters, and you want to notate which characters are appearing in a given scene so that, I don't know, if you want to search that up later on and figure out where Lorelei, one of my main characters, appears, not just as the POV character, but anytime she shows up. So let's go back to the inspector. We'll bring up the custom metadata again. This points of ellipsis under custom metadata here. Click on that, comes up with the same dialog. And now we can click plus, and we're going to do characters, plural. So the idea is that we're just trying to notate which characters appear in this scene. I'll hit enter and I'll have text, but this time I'm going to make it wrap text. We'll make this red just to show that off. I'll say okay. And now, just like the other ones, it's available here. And keep in mind, you can adjust these panes as you see fit. So I'm going to scroll this down just so I have more room here. The keywords, I don't often use that, so I don't need a lot of space for that. So here we have characters. So here I'll click in characters, and I might have Lorelei, and I'll just make it comma separated, Creed, character name Ordrin, and so on. Now, because this is wrapped, let me just add some more text here. I'm just going to put in some extra characters. If I shrink this, we'll see that wrapping. Otherwise, it wouldn't. Okay. And it'll do the same thing in these columns. That might be a better use case. So let me get rid of that stuff. And again, I'll come here and I'm going to get rid of some of these. So I want to get rid of these targets. They're just taking up a lot of space. Okay, here I have more space. I'm going to right click again and we'll put characters on here. And we can see that it's wrapped this already because we set that wrap. And I'll drag that column to the right and make that wider. And we can see that it's no longer wrapping. It's using the available space it has to it in that column. Let me just change that quickly to non-wrap and we'll see how that works. So I'll go back in here and characters, I'll make it so it doesn't wrap. Say okay. So now if I shrink this, it just puts points of ellipsis here. This is difficult to see, but I'll zoom in here. And so you can see it's just cutting it off. So you can see that there's something in there, but not all of it. And you would have to then go to the metadata tab and the custom section here and look at that value. So either way is fine depending on your needs. Neither is better than the other. It just depends on how you want to split your real estate in this view. Okay, the fourth example I want to give is using a date. Maybe you want to track the date that the scene takes place in your story. I tried using this kind of thing on my fantasy stories, but of course they didn't use our Gregorian calendar, so it didn't really work. But if you do use our system of time and date, this may be useful. So we'll go back in here, we're going to add, we'll just call it date and time. And you can move these up and down, by the way, and that will change how they appear in that custom metadata tab and also in the list, the pick list that you get as you're choosing new columns. So I'm going to move that to the bottom, and then I'm going to choose date. And so when I choose date, I get different options in this lower pane, and you can choose from a number of different formats. So you may or may not have the time. It may just be a date, or it could be date and time. So I'm just going to choose this one here, this short date and time. You can have a custom format and you can learn more about that if you want. You can also have it ignore time zone changes that may prove useful. So I'll say okay. And so now we get this date and time. Let me just add this quickly here. I'm going to right click and put date and time. And we can see that it has this little icon indicating that it's a date field. And we can double click here and type values in, but we can't pick from a calendar. You have to go to the inspector and that custom metadata tab, and then you can click on this little calendar icon and choose a date. So I can set this to whatever I like and just click off of that little sub window, and then it chooses it for me. And so then it shows up here. Now it's interesting to note that in the column, it only shows the date. So if you have date and time, for example, here, you'll have to go to this inspector to see the full value. But this may be enough for you for your purposes. Okay, the fifth example is a Boolean. So let's say that we want to track whether or not we've written an epigraph for each of the chapters. So the plan would be to write one epigraph for every chapter, and you want to track via a checkbox whether or not you've done it. So let's go back here, and I'm just going to make this epigraph. Hit enter, and again, I can put that wherever I'd like. I'm going to keep this towards the top, and I'll change that to a checkbox. And so we can either have it ticked by default or not. So it kind of depends on your needs, but in this case, since I don't have them yet, I've just started my project, for example, I want them off by default. So I'll just say okay. And so again, that shows up immediately over here. I can right click and add that. And when I do, I can see they're all unchecked. And then whenever I want to change that, I can just come to the outliner and click it. So now I can see over here and in this column that it's checked. And I can also see all of the different columns that I'm currently viewing based on the binder selection, what they're set to. And if I select more, let me just get a whole bunch of them here. We can see that those show the same thing. Same thing with the other columns too. So they get some default values, often blank or none, or checked or unchecked, that sort of thing. So having a checkbox to mark something, whatever that means to you for your project, may be of use. A sixth example might be a scene type. So let me go back to a particular scene here, and I'll go back to the metadata, and we're going to add scene type. So maybe you want to track things like whether or not that particular scene is action focused or romantic or mysterious, or it's a plot twist, that type of thing. So you could add a list, and then you could add list items. So maybe it's action, mystery, plot twist, some major reversal, that type of thing. And then say, okay. So here we'll bring that in, the scene type, and again, the default is none, and I could change these to whatever I'd like. So you can start to see the power that this gives you. It's very, very configurable in terms of what you want to track for each of your scenes, each of your documents even. This is not just the scene level. You can have it on folders as well, which might have multiple scenes underneath them. A seventh example is maybe you want to track subplots. So let's create subplots. Now I could make this a text field in which I add different values, different subplots that I'm having. The Fellowship of the Ring is trying to get to Bree, and then to Rivendell, and then through Moria to the other side, and then all the way to Mount Doom. Those could be individual subplots, and there could be some that are kind of overlapping a little bit. You could have some longer term threads that you're trying to track, and then you're trying to figure out which scenes are contributing to those different subplots. So again, I could have text, but one way that you could tackle this as well is to create multiple checkboxes for the different threads that you're going to have. So to do that, let's change this from subplots to, let's just call it Bree. So the Fellowship, for example, going to Bree, that's a subplot. And we'll make this Boolean. So we'll just call that a checkbox. It'll be off initially. And then let's make another one that's like a long-term one, and we'll call it corruption of Frodo. So we'll just call this corruption. We'll make that a checkbox as well. Say, okay, I'm going to gain some real estate and add those two. And so here we can see the columns, Bree and corruption. And one might be very distinct, like it kind of stops at a certain point and does not continue. Whereas something like Frodo becoming corrupted by the ring and the power that it has could be applied to several different places over the course of the entire novel. So we might have something like this. So that's kind of more spread out, and you want to be able to track that potentially in your project, like when that is occurring, so you can go back to those and see if you're hitting the right notes, if you're building over time and bringing the right emotions, the dread that Frodo feels and his allies feel, his friends, his dear friends feel for him at the same time. The point I'm trying to make here is that for any given intent that you have, for things that you want to track about your project, there could be multiple ways to tackle it. So just keep that in mind, that you do have these 4 different types of metadata available, and each one can be configured slightly differently. Another example where it could be approached in different ways is collaborators. Maybe you're working with other people, either other writers or editors, critiquers, that sort of thing. And so you could have something like a text field where you just type in who is collaborating with you on any given scene. But you could also do it with these checkboxes. Or if it's only one person for any given scene, you could have a list instead. So let's say that's the case. So we'll go back in here, click here, and we'll just say collaborator. So not collaborators, just collaborator. And we'll make this a list. And then we could just add the people that we're working with. Greg, Tammy, whoever. And so now when we want to notate that, we can just click on that and pick one or the other. So again, that applies if it's just one per scene. For the next one, let me swing back to the first tab in the inspector here. I mentioned there's the title, the synopsis, and notes. Now, let me get rid of that for a second, and let me right click here. And if I look in here, there are no notes. I can't see notes in here as one of the possibilities. And that's because it's a fairly large field. It's meant for quite a bit of text, and that's not really the purpose of things that you're going to put into the outliner. But let's say you did have something that was going to be fairly succinct, but that you do want to see here. And so that's a possibility too. So let's bring this back, and we're going to add outliner notes. So I'll make this text, and I will have the wrap, and I'll just say okay. And so I can add a lot of different text in here. So let me just take some text so I have something to work with. So let's say it's about that size. I'm just going to paste it over here. So not too large. And I'll go back to the outliner, And then I'll select multiple scenes in my binder. I'll get rid of this. So I'm going to right click here and add those outliner notes. And because it's wrapped, we see that it's stretched down quite a bit. And if I make this larger, it will just stretch that over and justify it and take less space in that row. I can, of course, shrink some of these other columns to gain more space for that. You'll adjust this however you need to, whatever's most important or however much space it needs. It shouldn't take any more than that, so that things that do need more space, you can adjust. And so again, I can click in here and adjust this however I need to, and then I can enter, and that'll save that. I can also click and arrow down to get to other fields so that I can add those quickly if I want to, or edit them quickly. The 10th example of custom metadata could be something like plot beats. My last video was on a new novella that I wrote for a charity anthology, and in it I detailed how I used Dan Wells' 7-point story structure. I actually used 9 points in my plot, and I'll link that so you can take a look at that. But you might have something like that, or the hero's journey, or the 3-act structure, and you want to notate which scenes apply to which of those parts of your plot. And so as our last example, I'll come back in here and I'll click add, and I could have plot beat or what have you. And that could be text or possibly a list. Again, if it's only going to be one value, you might want to have it as a list to make it easier, so there's less typing involved. Or if you wanted a bit more free form, if it possibly applies to 2 of those things, then maybe you're going to keep that a text field, and maybe you're going to wrap it again. So I'll just make that a list in our example, and I could have things like the hook 1 and plot turn 1. I'm not going to do all of them. I'm just doing a few so you can see maybe the midpoint, etc. And so then once you have that set, you can mark what each of those is contributing towards, what each scene is going to add to. So if I right click here, I can add that plot beat. Then I have the ones available I just added. So that's the hook. This one's the plot turn. This one is the midpoint, etc., etc. So custom metadata just allows you a ton of flexibility to add things to your project that you care about, that you care to track for your scenes, that give value to you. A couple more examples that I won't go over, but I'll pass along to you are things like the scene goal. I mentioned in my videos on scenes how you want to state what the scene goal is right up front. So there's a statement of a goal, there's the development of conflict, and generally speaking, some disaster for the characters. And so you could notate each of those in a text field. You might care about how long each scene takes. So you might have the date and time that it starts, but you also might care about how long it takes. It could be hours, it could be days. A scene could theoretically span years. And so maybe you care about that. You could be building towards different plot twists as your story moves along. And so maybe you want like a Boolean value to indicate where your plot twists occur. So you can kind of see those very quickly in the outliner view. Okay, so again, tons of flexibility. Hopefully that gives you enough ideas and the tools that you need to add them, and you can add as you see fit for your own projects. But let me show you one other thing. We saw that once you add those, they're available in this outliner view, but they're available in other places too. If you go to the find view, this is the project find. If I click on this magnifying glass, this gives the sort of scope and some other options for where it's going to search. So up at the top, it says search in everything. It's going to look through the contents of the scene, the title, the synopsis, and all the metadata. It has things like just the title, just the text, just the notes, that sort of thing. Down below, we see all this stuff that we just added: setting, plot beat, outliner notes, collaborator. If you want to search through those to find just Greg as a collaborator, then you could click collaborator and search for that. So I'll do that. So I search for that, and I've limited it to look just in that collaborator custom metadata field, and it finds it. I could do the same thing for any of those. And so keep that in mind. The power of this project search is huge. And it's great that Scrivener adds this for you automatically so that if you want to search for just those and not necessarily have to look for it in the outliner view, you can do that. One other place that the custom metadata might have value is if you want to export this. So you can see this in the outliner view, but you may want to export this to track it in some different way or report on it in some different way in a spreadsheet. And so you can do that by going under File, Export, and then Outliner Contents as CSV. So whatever scope you have in your outliner and the columns that you have showing will be exported if you choose this. And so you can just export this to a CSV. I'm not going to go over that. Just know that that's available to you if you want this externally for some reason. Again, to view it in a nicer manner, this is a little bit limiting, the Scrivener outliner view. It's nice, but there's not certainly spreadsheet capabilities in this view, and you may have a need for that. So you can export it if you want to. And then lastly, one other place that you might want to use this is in your compiled documents. So we have all of these. So let's say we want setting to appear, and we want that to be exported to our compiled documents. And so I'm going to go to compile. I have a whole video on compile, so you can check that out for more details. But let's go into my particular format that I've created. And let's say I want this to go into any new page. So like basically at the top of a chapter, I want some extra stuff shown. And the place that I would do that is under prefix. So I have, for any given chapter, it's going to have the title, brand new pages, prefix. So this is before anything. And here I have an example of the setting. And so I have the setting just in plain text. And then I have these angled brackets, $custom. And this is in the documentation for Scrivener. You can look at that for more details. But essentially, you just set this to $custom : and then the value that you set it to, the name of the field, I should say. So I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to make that upper. I actually don't know if it's case sensitive, but just in case. So I have setting, brackets, $custom setting. And so I'm going to say save. Okay, so my current scope are these 3 folders with these 3 scenes. So basically 3 chapters. And I can see that the first one has a setting. So I'm good with my scope. I'm going to go ahead back into compile, and I'm just going to say compile. And I'll save that to the document I already have set up for this. And then when I bring that up, I can see that after the chapter, it has that setting, : and it replaces that tag basically with the actual value, in this case, gland. And that would do that for any of the projects. And so right at the top, I could have a bunch of this custom metadata that I've set up, a little block of things that shows the stuff I care about, and it can be put into my compile so that I can see it, others can see it, that sort of thing. So just wrapping up, try to use the fields that Scrivener gives you. There's no sense in creating custom metadata when there are fields that will work for you. So just familiarize yourself with what is in the inspector for any given scene. Again, look at this first tab and see the title, synopsis, notes. Look at other fields that you already have, like the keywords and the label. You might be able to use those. And if not, then you have a lot of different options with custom metadata, tons of flexibility that you can use and then show in your outliner and possibly export via your compile or to a spreadsheet. I hope those concrete examples of custom metadata spur new ideas for data you find useful in your own writing projects, whether they're novels, nonfiction projects, screenplays, or whatever you extremely creative people are up to. And if you've added your own metadata for something that we didn't cover in this video, I hope you'll post a comment below so other people can see what you're up to as well. As always, if you liked this video, I hope you'll like and share with other writers and writer groups. We're a small but growing channel, and every little bit helps. I have a ton of videos I hope to tackle soon, including how to plot backwards, hidden features of Scrivener, and more. So hit subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, dream big, stay positive, and keep writing. Peace, everyone.